first talk today with Serge Tiroche. We are just waiting a few more minutes so he can join. Hope he will be there soon. I hope you are all fine, staying safe and carefully at home. It's been a very surreal situation, as we all know, but I hope I can give you all a little bit of better art insight with these little talks every Wednesday, every Friday, and every Sunday. Okay. Hello, Serge.
Hi, Oli.
Great.
How are you?
Everything works. Perfect. All good. How are you?
I'm good. You hear me okay?
The video is a little bit stuck. Now it works. Perfect. Now it works. Great.
Yeah, good.
Okay. We already have a lot of viewers, already 24, and I think we can start. Thanks again for giving me the chance, or if it was you, the chance to coming here this Wednesday to talk a little bit about yourself, about your collection, about your art experience, and maybe in the beginning you can tell the community a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Hi everyone. I'm Serge Tiroche. I'm an Israeli. I grew up here and in the States. My father was in the art world for many years. He was a dealer in antiques and a collector of all sorts of art. And later he became a gallerist and had galleries in Tel Aviv and in New York and in Palm Beach. Mostly working with French Impressionists and Post-Impressionists. And I grew up in this environment where we had art around us all the time. But I have an older brother and a sister, and they sort of took over my father's businesses. One of them, the fine art, and the other one took over the antiques business. And I sort of decided to go on another trajectory when I was young and went to study business. But eventually, you know, the art was in my blood, and I came back into the art world.
Okay, great. Okay, when did you come back to the art world? When was it?
Well, I went to school in Paris. University in Paris, at the American University in Paris, and I studied international business administration. But you know, I was fortunate that my parents were in Paris at the time, and my brother was there, and so I started, you know, going around with them. They were a lot at Drouot in the auction house and in the flea market, and I got to know the business of art dealing. A bit later, I went and I did an MBA at INSEAD and joined Citigroup, where I spent 10 years in private banking. And during all this time, I had started going to art fairs and collecting contemporary art for myself. And then in 2007, before the banking crisis, I decided to leave the bank and basically bring together my two passions for you know, general investments in the markets and collecting contemporary art, and try to create a bridge really between investment and collecting.
Okay, great. This leads to the next question. Like, you have the Tiroche de Lyon collection, which is an art fund. Then you have another program, which is the START. And then you have your Africa First collection. Maybe you can talk a little bit about each of the projects to the community and what are the specific topics about this.
Sure. When I left the bank, you know, I took a lot of lessons that I had seen in the worlds of finance, in private equity, in venture capital, in real estate, in hedge funds, in, you know, markets in general, and thought that, you know, it would be interesting to try and bring some new models into the art world and see how they can be applied. And I did all kinds of, I'm a very entrepreneurial person. I did a lot of startups. A few of them succeeded, a couple didn't, you talk only about 3 projects that I'm still running, but I had a lot of other projects I was involved with. So I was an early investor and the chairman of Artist Pension Trust, which is a global company that tried to find a financial solution for artists to save for their pension in the future by pooling artworks together. So that was one of the first projects I got involved in when I left the bank, and that company is still operating. I was involved for the first 3 years until 2010. And then basically I decided to leave it because I didn't see eye to eye with the owners of the company about, how we would go about actually selling the works that were in the collection and how we would distribute those proceeds to the artists. So the strategy was not aligned. So I left the company. But at the same time that I got involved in that, I also founded START, which you asked about. And that's an Israeli art incubator project. And the idea there was very much like a venture capital idea where you really look for talent and you invest in people and their ideas. And, eventually in the future, if they're successful, you benefit from their success. And that was the idea here as well. So I used to go out to, art schools all over Israel to see the graduating programs and select every year 2 to 3 artists with whom I would work for the next 2 to 3 years, helping them really launch their careers, introducing them to galleries and collectors and dealers. And some of these artists that I worked in total, I've worked with about 150 Israeli artists in the program. And some of them have become, relatively successful, not just in Israel, but internationally. And that's an ongoing project. I still do, support, residencies, sponsor projects, introductions, all kinds of, things like that to really help them move their career forward. And then you asked about the Tiroche de Leon collection. So that's really a fund I founded with one of my banking clients back in 2011. It's an art fund called Art Vantage, and Art Vantage owns a collection called the Tiroche de Leon collection. And that collection was focused on, or is focused on, contemporary art from developing markets. So basically it's a global fund, ex-US, Europe and Japan, with a heavy allocation to Asia. So we started in 2011 and, we went in India. We started in India actually building a very, I think, good collection of contemporary Indian art.
Yes.
We went on and went into China a number of times and bought quite a bit there. And then Southeast Asia, Philippines, Indonesia, Thailand, but also other parts of the world, like Latin America was another big area of focus for us. Where we invested 20% of our assets. Africa was also part of that, and then Middle East, Latin America, Eastern Europe. And in 2017, I really stopped buying for that fund because that fund has a 10-year life, and the first 5 years were sort of the acquisition period. And once that acquisition period, I decided to set up another platform called Africa First, which is only using my own capital, so it's not a fund, and focusing on African contemporary art. And I've been doing that very intensively since then. You know this program quite well.
Yes.
And it's, that's been a great journey as well. We've been doing residencies,
yes.
Prizes, sponsorships for publications and exhibitions and all kinds of activities all over the world, helping young African artists grow their careers.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
You're as well like a member of the selection committee for the Accessible Art Fair Brussels. Can you tell a little bit about this? How do you select galleries, artists for these fairs?
Well, the Accessible Art Fair is kind of an unusual art fair in the sense that it's not an art fair where the galleries are the clients, but actually the artists are the clients. It's the artists that present themselves to an audience. It's generally, younger artists that don't have major gallery representation. And myself and a few other people in the art world got behind Stephanie, who's the founder, Stephanie Menasa, to help her really get the word around that there's a fair like this where underrepresented artists can have a chance to show their work and sell it, and ensure there's a certain level of quality. And so, once a year, we get together, the committee, and we review all the portfolios that were sent in by applicant artists. And we basically, have an open discussion about each of the portfolios. And basically the top, 40 or 50 artists get selected. And my involvement, this year I was planning to do actually to grow the African section of the fair quite substantially. But I was going to apply a very different model, which was basically by invitation rather than by submission. Okay. And that I would invite some young artists that I've seen in my research and that I like and that I've collected, and invite them over to Brussels, fully funded through sponsorships we would raise. And we were also thinking about inviting them to a residency in Brussels, that I would approach some of my collector friends in Brussels to host the artists there. And basically it was going to be a pavilion, an African contemporary pavilion rather than a fair with booths, and have a curated show around a specific theme. So the artists would make specific work for the fair throughout the year. And we were going to do that in October. But obviously, because of the current situation, this whole project has been put on ice for now. And we'll probably, look at it again for next year. But the idea was already sort of fairly well developed. And I think it would have been great for the artist. Unfortunately, we're going to have to wait with that a little longer.
Yes. And how many artists did apply last year, for example? I think it's amazing scenario. Like we have hundreds of portfolios, and then you can easily select the good things and the good themes. How many artists were there in? Is it kind of?
Yeah, I believe there were about, I don't remember the exact number, but over 100. Mm-hmm. And I think in total, the fair accepted about 40, if I'm not mistaken. Mm-hmm. Those are more or less the numbers. Okay. For last year.
Okay.
And this year, we haven't had the selection committee meeting yet, because we're not even sure if they're going to do the fair in October at all. We're still waiting to see what happens with, what is allowed, what is restricted. I think they haven't still made a decision at the fair management if they're going to hold the fair this year or not. But I think for now they're still accepting applications. So if there are any artists out there who want to apply independently to the platform, they can go on Accessible Art Fair and send in their application. And I'll be reviewing it at some point later if the fair goes ahead.
Especially in this scenario or in this scene, it's currently very good to have something like this, and the people can send their applications, so we can still continue. Okay,
yes.
Great. Coming more to your private collection, like the Africa First, or in general, how do you choose your pieces of art? Can you explain a little bit about this? Do you look only for quality or only for the theme, for the artist? Can you explain a little bit more in deep? Because I guess a lot of people want to know how to do it well.
Oh, well, it depends. If I'm buying for investment purposes, for an art fund, I have one set of sort of guiding principles. If I'm buying for my private collection, it's a different set of principles. But, in both cases, I think it all starts with an interaction with an artwork. If I see an artwork that speaks to me and interests me and excites me, I want to look further into it, get to know the artist, do some reading, look at the rest of the artist's production, then try to understand, how old is the artist, what's the trajectory been, who's collecting the artist, what curators are behind him, what kind of museum shows he or she have had, what are their plans going forward, are they really ambitious, and are they innovating? I think for me, if art is, a repeat of something else I've seen, or very closely resembles other things I've seen, I'm generally less interested. So I try to look for things that innovate to me and are done at the high quality. I'm also very interested in the quality of the work, not in the sense that how shall I explain quality? It's a tricky word. That basically the artist is trained and is experienced and knows how to deal with his material and produces a strong work.
Okay, yes. It's always very difficult to explain quality, but sometimes you really see it like straight away. Sometimes it needs a second view, but it's very difficult in general how to explain quality in art.
Yes. And what might seem like great quality to one collector may look terrible to another, and that's the beauty of art. It's very subjective at the end of the day.
Yes, exactly.
Although the art world we live in is becoming more and more consensus driven, which is unfortunate, but you know, the better an image gets seen on Instagram, the more likely it is to be sold and find collectors and have success these days. So we're seeing a flattening of the art.
Do you think like in all these online and media and Instagram has like a big impact even to create quality? Like seeing, like for example, the more likes, the more people they following an artist. Does it have an impact for you, or do you think this will create a certain quality which is somehow built up by media or by Instagram?
I think Instagram is an amazing tool, especially these days, you know, when people, are less able to go and see galleries. I think they spend a lot of time on social media, and Instagram for the art world is, perhaps the number one tool these days. So, of course, if you use Instagram in an intelligent way, it can be amazing for your career if you get the right visibility. But again, I think because we're looking at images on telephones, it's very hard to get a real sense for the artistry of the work itself. We see strong images, we can understand the theme, but can we really see the quality of the painting when we're looking at the screen? No, we can't. Can we really see how good the drawing is on the screen? I don't think so. And I think I think Instagram works better actually for painters and people who work in two-dimensional work. I think videos, nobody has the patience to watch a video on the screen.
Yes.
I think to see installations or we're not yet there. I think once Instagram builds in some virtual reality or augmented reality and three-dimensionality into the experience, I think it might help artists working in other mediums as well.
Yeah.
But at the moment, it's a very two-dimensional medium.
Yeah, I agree. Like for example, does this lead as well like to you like do you buy a lot of artworks through mails or like some PDFs, or do you rather prefer to see the artwork in flesh before deciding whether to go for it or not?
It's a combination. It has happened to me that I've bought a new artist just by seeing an image on the screen. I won't say it hasn't. I usually prefer to see at least some of the works physically, and I like to meet the artist when I can. I used to travel a lot. Obviously, these days we travel less. But I'm one of those collectors. For me, collecting is not a fun activity. It's maybe I should rephrase that. I love collecting, but I don't do it for fun. I do it as a profession. So I spend a lot of time going out on the road, doing my own research, talking to people, gallerists, collectors, dealers, doing the art fairs, doing the biennales, and getting to meet the artists. And so I get to see a lot of work in the flesh as well while I'm traveling. But sometimes, if there's an artist I know already and I'm interested in, and then I get images on the phone or in a PDF, I can easily make a decision to buy a work based on those images.
very quickly. Yeah. This leads me to the next question. How do you think, what do you think about waiting lists and the current status, that people are waiting for works for a long time? How do you think about this?
Well, I think, waiting lists are a necessary evil in this environment that we're in, where there's so much hype around art. I think what's unfortunate with waiting lists is that there's very little transparency about them. So even if you put your name on the waiting list, it really depends who you are. I mean, sometimes you'll get a call back. Sometimes, you'll never get a call back, and the artist has produced 100 works since you put your name on the list and sold them to other people.
Yeah.
So is it really, are you really on the waiting list? No, you've expressed interest, and, they call it a waiting list, but it's there's no guarantee that you'll ever be offered a work. Or you'll get a work you like, and and sometimes you feel like if you are offered the work, it's probably after 50 other collectors have been shown it and didn't want it, and you've been offered it. So you ask yourself, should I really buy it, even if I wanted to buy this artist?
Is it so bad? Is it so good?
Yeah, exactly. So it's a tricky thing, waiting lists, I think. But it's normal, on the other hand, that, artists and galleries want to make sure that, the artists they represent end up in institutional collections or private institutional type collections.
Mm-hmm, yeah. As well, for me, as a young collector at the beginning, and to see this, let's say, understanding this market, it was pretty hard to get some quality works with this kind of situation of waiting lists. Do you think there's some kind of unbalance that the big collectors get always the great and the best pieces of art, and people who wants to start really patiently, not patient, but passionate, having the issue that they can only get pieces with lesser quality? Do you think
yes, the answer is yes, there is an issue, obviously, and that's why I think younger collectors have to work a lot harder and discover artists much earlier before they come to the attention of the big collectors. The big collectors can also spend larger sums than young collectors or early stage collectors are able to. So I think there's an advantage in being a young collector like you, in the sense, because you have an amazing collection, you have an amazing eye, following what you've been doing, and it's due to hard work. I mean, I'm sure you do a lot of research, you look around, and the artists you buy very early, and you're able to buy good pieces. If you were trying to buy that violet that's behind you today, you probably wouldn't get it because there are 50 other more important collectors ahead of you, waiting to get a work. So you have to come in early, and young collectors who are really passionate and spend the time and do the research are able to buy before the big ones in those circumstances.
Yeah. I think it's definitely hard working in the beginning for young collectors, but I can only say it's worth it if you find the artist very early and listen to your gut feeling. It's always very pleasant if you collect them before the big collectors. I had this ever situation like this, which is always amazing. Okay, great. Okay, we already had some more. What do you think how this current pandemic scenario will affect the market? How do you see the market is changing afterwards?
Well, I think, I'm not a doomsday person. I don't think, the art market will freeze and, we won't see any activity. I mean, I've been feeling actually quite interestingly that there are a lot of active collectors at the moment, who think they can find, bargains, and they're calling and they're asking around, and they're not willing to pay the full price in most cases. But about the future, I think we'll see, obviously, less art fairs. I think the models will change. I think, we've already seen the growth of online in the last few years. I think that will speed up, and we'll see more and more transactions happening online. I think in the auction arena as well, things will change. Auction houses have been debating whether or not they should continue to print physical catalogs for a long time. And I think, this is a good reason to move, more online and print less catalogs and cut costs. And and what would be amazing is if the big auction house were able to move a lot of their business online. Maybe they need less staff, maybe they need less offices, maybe they don't need to produce so many catalogs, and maybe they can reduce the transaction costs in the industry, which would be a great boost to all of us. I think one of the biggest problems of our industry is transaction costs. I don't know of any other industry where the average intermediary fee is somewhere between 30 and 40%. How can you efficiently run an economy in this way? Prices need to be inflated all of the time for it to make sense. So it's tricky. I think transaction costs in the art world are very high, and by moving online, hopefully we can reduce them and make the art world more efficient.
And do you think, how long will it take? We just saw it with Art Basel Hong Kong, and as well the upcoming auctions will be first mostly online, and some print editions were already quite successful. How do you think, how long will it take that the market will be kind of similar to what we had before the scenario in the online world? Do you think we will have similar hammer prices, or will it be a little bit frightening in the beginning, and then the people are not that risky as it is in the normal room auction?
Look, I think good quality works will always sell very well, by the right artists, especially if they're popular at the moment and their waiting lists. I mean, I just sold a piece privately yesterday that I wasn't even trying to sell. An auction house called me because somebody was looking for it. They were willing to pay top dollar. It's higher than any auction price that was ever recorded for the artist. So that's great news. But I think generally in this environment, there are a lot of bargain hunters out there and wanting to buy cheaper. And I think at auctions, you will be able to find bargains, as you always are. But perhaps now, sellers who are under pressure will be even more flexible with their reserves, or try to sell works without reserve at all. And if you pay attention and you follow, you can really pick things up very cheaply compared to what the prices were a few years ago. But I think for the more established artists, I don't think the prices will go down, at least not, in the near term. I think if we see a very serious impact on the economies in general, and we see, unemployment very high, GDP numbers going down, company earnings going down, stock markets crashing, I think eventually that will also have an impact on demand in the art market in general. And then we might see prices stagnating. But generally what happens in the art world when there's a crisis, it's not so much because it's an illiquid asset class. The prices don't really adjust as quickly as they should. So what happens is that just a lot of stuff is withdrawn from the market. And what you see is that the prices are kept artificially more or less the same, but there's very little transactions actually going on. And you can see that if you look at even at auctions, the volumes at auction houses are declining a lot. Not necessarily the prices, but the volumes are declining a lot, because the good material, nobody wants to bring it out when there isn't, a strong underlying economy.
Yeah. So quality will last and less volume, probably.
I don't know what you mean by quality, but prices will, in my opinion, not move down very dramatically. There will be situations where they will, at least in the near term. What I said about prices is if in the long term we see, a very strong recession, then prices may also go down. But I think what we will see immediately in auctions is a reduction in volumes. So less works coming to auction at lower price brackets, fewer sales happening, a lot more works that are iffy will be BI'd and not sold. So I think in general, the auction volume will come down quite a lot. In 2020 compared to 2019, I would estimate, at least a 25%, 30% contraction of volumes. And that's after 2019 has already seen a decline in volumes of about 25% from the year before. So we're looking at a substantial decrease in volumes compared to the height of the market in 2019. 17, 18, yeah.
Okay. Wow, crazy. Okay. Yes. Like, if you would restart your collection journey, or you do it quite for a long time now, was there any regret, or what would you do differently? It's always very interesting to know, like as well a little bit kind of the, let's say, call it failures or little things, despite of the positive things. One big regret.
I mean, I think I think my main regret is that I sometimes get tempted to sell too quickly when I'm successful in picking a good artist, because, like I said, for me, art it's a passion. Of course, it's a huge passion, but it's also my main source of income. So I can't just buy. I don't have income from another industrial activity or whatever, or real estate, or that I can use to buy art. So in order to continue to buy art, I need to sell other art. So it's kind of in and out all the time. I sell a lot less than I buy in terms of quantities, but from time to time I need to sell. And when I sell, it's usually those artists that have a stronger market, whose prices are good, and so on. And maybe one of the biggest regrets is that you sell those works when their market has appreciated, but 5 years later or 10 years later, the prices have again doubled or tripled, and you say, "Oh man, maybe I should have held on to that." but it wouldn't be fun, just buying art. For me, just buying art and sitting on it and having it on the walls, isn't really enough fun. It's much more fun to go out, meet artists, and and do a lot of business and buy and sell. And I love being active. I'm a workaholic, you could say. a collectorholic. Collectorholic.
Very, very nice. And for especially we have a lot of young collectors, or as well as young artists. Do you have some advices from your experience? What can you give us if we want to start a journey of collecting, or if you want to start continuing doing art?
Sorry, can you repeat the question? I'm not sure. Are you asking me for advice for artists or for collectors?
For both. Well, first for collectors, and then we can as well for the artists.
Well, for collectors, I would say, it's the usual answer. I mean, go out there, spend as much time as you can with art, see it. Don't be afraid to jump in. Everybody makes mistakes. Tastes change. My tastes evolved a lot over the years as well, and it's absolutely normal. But I think it's huge fun, and the longer you wait, the more you miss out. So start early as soon as you can, and enjoy the ride, and be sure to make mistakes and find successes. But there's so much pleasure in it. It's it's highly recommended for every collector. Anybody who wants to be a collector. For artists, I would say, work hard, follow your gut feeling, choose your partners. Very important to choose your partners. Respect your partners, and be patient. I think a lot of us have. Again, one of the things that's happening is that patience is running out. Everybody's time frames are short. People want quick success. People want their prices to rise very quickly, and I'm not sure it's healthy. I mean, artists whose prices rise too fast, it's very hard to keep up with that. And life is long. If at 30 years old your paintings are already selling at $2 or $3 million, I mean, what's next? Yeah. It's so it's a double-edged sword. Success. It's nice when it's a nice trajectory and you're taking it easy and you're picking your partners and you're working smartly, and success will come. If you're good, if you deserve it. Not everyone who wishes to be an artist should be an artist.
Yeah. Great. Very cool. We have so many questions here in the community. Maybe we can answer some of them.
Let's try.
If you had to sell your arts, what would be the last piece you would keep? It's from daily sketching.
Probably the last piece I bought. one thing my father told me, and I believe in it. You always love your most recent acquisition. Otherwise, you wouldn't buy it. So,
yeah, I agree. It's always mostly it's like the newest treasure. Exactly, great. Yes. Do your selling activities reduce access to works from the gallery that sold you the piece?
Does it reduce access to the galleries? That's a very good question. I mean, I don't think so, because one of the things I've always represented, I think, is transparency. All of the galleries I work with, before I buy a single piece for them, we have a conversation. They completely understand what I'm doing, and I think I have a lot of good. How should I say, relationships with many of the top galleries around the world. And as long as I let them know, I mean, I hold the work long enough, and I let them know when I want to sell something, and, give them the opportunity to sell it themselves. I mean, galleries will always tell you that, if you ever want to sell, bring us the work back, and we'll try and place it for you. And that's true. But, when push comes to shove, most of them would prefer to sell, especially when we're talking about contemporary artists who are producing work every day. They'll prefer to sell something they have in inventory, where the gallery makes 50% and the other 50% goes to the artist, than to sell a work that the collector bought a few years ago and only make a 20% commission. Yeah. So, their interest, I mean, they say this, and I go back to them and I say, are you interested in placing this? And most of the time they're not, because they have their own inventory and they prefer to sell that. Yeah. But that's the understanding. That's how it works, and when I have to sell, I have to sell.
And is there do you have from your experience a time where you say, okay, sometimes it takes 5 years, sometimes it takes 10 years, or when you decide to sell the artwork?
Sure. I mean, I have artworks that I've been holding for 20 years or 25 years that I haven't sold, because either because I really love them and I want to keep them, or because the artist's market isn't ready, and you can't really sell them. There's no demand. I have hundreds, maybe thousands of works like that in storage. Those are accumulating a lot of costs as well, but that's the game we're in. I mean, generally, in order to obviously respect the gallery's work and the artist, I'm not a flipper. I'm never going to buy work and resell it within a year or two. I'll hold works at least 3 years. That's really the minimum. Usually 5 or 10 years. Yeah. That's the range after which I sell. The fund that I run was structured precisely like that. It had an investment period for 5 years where we didn't sell any works. And then only after 5 years we could sell the works we bought in the first year. So we would have held them for at least 5 years before we sold them. And a lot of the works we actually bought in the beginning, and we're still holding them after 8 or 9 years, and now we have to sell them. So so our average holding period in the fund, I would say, is maybe 5-6 years, 7 years even is the average holding period. Which is, if you went and you said, even a collector said, I'm buying now, but in 7 years I'm going to want to sell. A gallery will understand that it's not, it's not flipping. It's helping. And I think, one other thing I should say, I think it's very important for artists to also establish a secondary market, especially when prices go up. If you're buying an asset at a very high price, if you're buying a building, if you're buying stocks, if you're buying whatever you buy that's very expensive, you want to know that it has some liquidity, that eventually you can sell the work.
Yeah.
So that's. And
would you recommend during this current scenario that the market is changing? Would you rather recommend the people who have to sell, or to rather wait, or should they try to take the risk to sell it if they need?
Should they? Sorry again. What?
like in the current situation, if people have to sell it, do you think that then you would recommend rather to keep the work? Of course, it depends on the artist.
Well,
but,
yes,
or rather wait for better times.
Well, it really depends on the artist and what you're trying to sell. I mean, it's very hard to generalize. I think if you don't have to sell, don't sell at this time, because there are times where the market is more buoyant and it's probably a better time to try and sell. But that doesn't mean that the market is dead. If you have, like I said, a piece that's in demand at the moment, you can certainly sell it.
Okay. Yes. Great. Okay. So many questions. Do you buy art from artists who are self-taught or not represented by any gallery?
All the time. Yeah, I actually prefer. Generally, I'm impressed by artists that are self-taught.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
absolutely. Who do you think benefits more, the artist whom you bought work from, or the collector? Do you learn more from the art you acquired in contrast to the money you pay? It's from Wallen Mopondera.
Yeah, very interesting question. I think it really depends on the artist as well. But for me, there's always a reward when I meet an artist and I get to understand the work, and it gets me to think about things a bit differently. So there's a massive reward that's not financial in the activity of collecting. That's the beauty of it compared to a lot of other investments. It's very hard, who benefits more. I don't know. I mean, it depends how the artists feel when they meet a collector. I mean, maybe Wallen should answer. How did he feel when he met me? Does he feel that's been useful to him in any way? I don't know. It's a very individual question for the artist, and it depends on the relationship between the artist and the collector.
Yeah. Okay, great. What mediums do you think will evolve? Video, performance, or do you have any recommendations? It's from Art Patron.
Yeah, well, that's a tricky one. I mean, I think all mediums will evolve, and I think video and digital works and have a lot of room to grow and evolve with technology, and technology will always impact the production of art. But I also think, on the other hand, that painting is an everlasting medium. So is drawing. So is etching. So I think all the mediums will grow and expand. Some. If you're thinking about investment, then, some mediums are better investment mediums than others. I mean, photography, I love photography, but I think for investment purposes, it's very tricky to invest in photography. Yeah. I think the same thing for video. There are a few cases where, video art prices for video art have gone up, but in most cases, video is very hard to resell.
Yeah. Especially like editions, you can easily copy them. And if you have a painting, which is like a unique work, which is only once in the world, it's much more like somehow adorable than a kind of a video which can easily be copy pasted.
Hey, listen, I see that Stefan Simko is on the line and he's writing hundreds of questions. Why don't we bring him on and have a threesome here?
I'm cut the BS, please. You can run a fund that has to be monetized. Okay. Wait a second. I will invite him.
Invite him. Let's bring him on and have a manly conversation here.
Okay, I send him. Send Stefan. Okay.
Stefan, join us, Mr. Simko.
He will be as well in a call talk next week. I already asked him, but I'm waiting. Where is he? No, I sent it to him. How can I invite him?
Well, you're the tech guy.
Yeah. I'm a little bit lost here too, I have to say. But I sent to him. How can I do that? Invite another.
He says I'm here.
Yes. But how can I get him in?
Good question. Let's move the call to Zoom.
Please write it in the comments, because here I'm not so sure. I think we have to restart because I think you can only do it in the beginning.
He says he just sent a request. See if you get it.
Yes. Wait a second. Send a request. No, I don't get it. You have to accept. Where is it, Stefan? Where is it? I don't see it. Shit. Sorry. You need to accept. Yes. I know, but where? I didn't get
I don't see a request on my screen either, so I don't know how it works.
We can restart the thing and then must leave and then rejoin and send request. Okay, here it goes. Guns and Rain. Stefan, you have to leave and rejoin and then send request.
Okay, Stefan, we're waiting for you. Let's take another question in the meantime.
Okay, another question. Here we go. There was many questions. Well, so many from Stefan. Here's Celeste was asking, Serge, could you tell us 3 emerging artists that would you recommend us to keep an eye on?
Okay, yeah, sure. Well, I'll tell you. I mean, I don't know if she's considered emerging. One of the artists I'm really, really crazy about at the moment is Firelei Baez. Well, I've been collecting her for a few years, but she has an amazing show on at James Coyne right now. It's all been sold out to institutions. There's a long waiting list. I don't know if you can get any works, but if you can, secondary market or whatever, I would highly recommend. She's really amazing. That's the sort of high end of the spectrum, let's say, or established names already. I think younger, very early. I would say probably Tuli Nikonjo from Namibia. I think she's really awesome. I only met her like a few months ago. I was going to invite her to this project in Brussels. I saw her work at Guns and Rain Gallery at 154 actually last October, and then have just bought my 4th work by her. I think she's really incredible. A third artist, who should I mention? Let me think. Well, Wallen's on the call. I mean, I saw Wallen's show in SMAC. He's also an artist. Wallen up on there. I've been collecting his work for a while. I think his show at SMAC in February was mind-blowing, like a completely new, power and very gutsy show with a lot of different works that if you saw them individually, you wouldn't understand like how they all come out from one artist. So he's extremely creative, and Wallen's great.
Yeah, Wallen's really good. Especially you have a Moffat Tagadewa as well. 2 pieces, no? I think.
Yeah, I have 2 Moffats. I have so many artists. I mean, Joanna Chumali, who just won the Hugo Boss Prize. I mean, there's so many good artists out there. Yeah, incredible. Someone is saying, Laura, actually, my fiance, who's my wife, I should say, even though we're not married, is saying we should tap on his name and then tap on Stefan's name and then tap add. Can you do that? Can you try?
There is no add. Oh shit. Wow.
Okay. Shall we all get off and try to come on again?
Yes. We will do it again. I will leave this chat now, and then I will restart, and then I will invite you and Stefan, and hope then we can do a sweet talk.
Okay.
Perfect. Okay. Great. Okay. See you all soon.
Speak soon.
1 minute.
Hello,
Stefan. Okay, now we have you, but we don't have Serge. Wait a second. Okay, let's check again. Do you know how to add like 3 people?
Can you add 3 people? Is it possible?
I'm not so sure because I can only send it to 1 guy. I don't know.
That's not good. You better bring Serge in. I don't think you can. Where's Serge?
Maybe Serge, can you send a request? I'll just send you the chat.
I don't think it's 3-way. There's no 3 ways. This is just straight 1-on-1, baby. There's no funny stuff here.
That's
Okay, go back to Serge. I'll talk to you later.
okay.
I'll be there snipping away. Bye.
Okay, great. Okay, see you soon. Thank you so much. Bye bye. Okay, people, we are waiting for Serge to be online again. Just a minute. We have so many people watching. I'm very happy about this talk tonight, and that we get so much insights and traction about this. It's amazing. Thank you so much all for joining. We will wait another minute. Oh, he's not on. Wait a few more minutes. Here we go. Maybe there we go. Hi, Serge. I just talked to Stefan. I think it's not. Yes, we can hear you. I think it's only a 101. I think it's not possible with 3 people apparently.
Yeah, I saw that. That's unfortunate. Next time we should do Zoom.
Yeah, Zoom. Yes, we can do that.
Zoom.
Okay.
Zoom.
Then I will do it this way. I will maybe for Saturday evening, if you have time, and I will ask Stefan. We can do a 3 talk maybe on Zoom, and maybe we can share it as well.
Sure.
I will ask him
if Stefan wants, with pleasure.
Yes, great. Okay, perfect. Then we will answer some more questions if there are. I'd like to see Serge and Stefan have a conversation. Okay, cool. I'm out. No, please, I would be very interested too.
No, Stefan asks all the tough questions, but that's cool.
I think he's still in, but
typing away. Stefan, ask a question. Stefan, ask a question. I'll try to answer it.
Okay. Stefan, are you still in? Have you seen Felda?
I've noticed that when it comes to artists of color, collectors are more interested in figurative works. Why? Interesting.
Why do you think of that? Is more figurative art?
Well, it's more Instagrammable for one, and I think people want black artists to represent black people. Mm-hmm. I think it's a new aesthetic, and people all over the world are attracted to that kind of aesthetic at the moment. Mm-hmm. I don't collect only figurative. I mean, in general, I do prefer figurative art, not just in Africa, everywhere. Yeah. I generally I have preference for figurative, but when I see good abstract work, I buy that too. I mean, Wallen is a great example. It's it's all abstract. Wallen's work, but there are lots of abstract artists in my collection, and that's why I started collecting years ago. It's abstract. I mean, yeah.
Okay. No, like for example, like some artists like Born Span, he's doing abstract and figurative art. I think in both ways interesting. I like his abstract works a little bit more into my taste. But in general, figurative art is very present currently. Okay, Stefan said they can buy social value because everyone knows that they're supporting marginal people. Pseudo-gooders.
Yeah, that makes sense as well, yeah.
Okay, great. Do we have some more questions? Stefan, maybe can you repeat your questions which you had in the previous chat, maybe? There were some good ones.
Well, let's open it up. Anybody who has questions, let's try and answer.
Yes. Yeah, we can buy here.
Agreed. A lot of it is crap, Stefan.
Where are the questions?
People see what works and they try to, imitate, copy it. And some of them find success that way. I mean, it's crazy.
Yes. Can we have some more? Do we have some more questions? How's the worst started the black artist market? Okay. Maybe maybe not. There were statements, not questions exactly. Yeah, we're waiting for some more questions. Stefan is right.
Okay.
Okay.
What aftershave do I use? No, I think he was asking you. I think he's more interested in you.
Again.
I think
last time you asked already the aftershave. I don't use aftershave.
I'm waiting for season 3, Stefan. We saw seasons 1 and 2, couldn't get our eyes off the screen. Waiting for 3.
What books on collecting do you recommend from Art Patron?
None.
Do you have
None.
some recommendation?
I don't read books.
Only.
I don't recommend reading books for collecting. Read books for other reasons, not for collecting.
Yes, you have to train
Collecting,
your art.
you have to learn the hard way.
Okay, here is so many. What criteria do you use when inviting artists for the Africa Artist Residency program?
Oh, well, it's easy. I mean, it needs to be artists that, I'm really interested in, that
Yes.
really caught my attention, that I think, will benefit the most from a residency like this. Coming here, getting the experience. For many of them, it's the first time they actually leave their home country, or it's the first residency they've done. I find that quite compelling and interesting, and also someone that I feel I want to collect in more depth and I want to get to know better. So those are the criteria. It's by invitation. It's yeah.
Great. Classical African mix with contemporary thoughts. The classical dealers have been very slow to appreciate the emerging contemporary. I'm not so sure where is the real question. Okay, we will skip to the next ones.
Wallen was asking an interesting question about
Yes.
who owns the work. Is it the artist or the buyer?
Yes.
Well, that's it depends what you mean by owns. Legally speaking, once a buyer buys the work, obviously he owns it, and the artist owns the copyright. Sometimes the artist can sell the copyright or share the copyright with the collector. But who owns the work? The intellectual property, the IP of the work, it will always be the artist's.
Yes.
The physical work, is owned by the collector, and
Yes.
and once it's left the artist studio and has been sold and gone out to the world, it really belongs to the world.
Yeah. Do you think one of the last talks we had, like an artist was asking if a collector is selling a piece of work, a piece of art, if the artist gets a certain percentage of it? Would you agree on this? What do you think about?
Oh, absolutely. I think artist resale rights should be implemented everywhere in the world. I wanted to, lobby for that basically in different places, but it's a big headache. But I think it should be implemented certainly for younger artists. I think for artists who already sell it in very high figures, I don't think it makes sense for them to get 2 or 3% of the value of the work when it resells. I think what would be good if artists, beyond what you could do is beyond a certain price level, I think there should be kind of a tax or a resale right that goes into a pool to support younger artists. So I think that would be amazing if on every transaction we could put 1% aside to support young artists. That would be, first of all, there would be so much money in there, and secondly, it would be a huge support, and you would basically replace all the government funding that there's according to the research out there, there's 60 billion worth of art that change hands every year. 60 billion. So that's 1% is $600 million a year.
We support so many artists.
$600 million a year, 1%.
Insane.
That's what they should do.
Yeah. crazy. Stefan was asking something more political. Tell us about the protests against Netanyahu and the mood in Israel, in Gaza, and the environment.
Oh my God.
Galleries closed. What's the vibe there?
Well, yeah, at the moment the galleries are closed. We've been getting emails that they're starting to reopen. I think generally the mood is finally, they're letting people out of the house, but still within, certain parameters, and not everybody can go back to work. So they're gradually, letting us go back to normalcy, which is a good thing as long as, the pandemic is under control. Politically, I mean, we just had a announcement of a unity government. I have mixed feelings about it. I mean, I would have liked to see a change in government. That's why I voted for Gantz. I'm not very happy that he's gone under Netanyahu's wing. Maybe he'll become prime minister in a year and a half. That's the deal. But, Netanyahu is so smart with these things that, maybe that will not happen in the end. Wouldn't be surprising. And the big question is, will Netanyahu get a real trial or not while he's prime minister? For I don't know if he's done anything wrong, but I think he should be tried if so many people think he has. So let's look at the evidence and let's let the courts decide. But in any case, I think Netanyahu has been prime minister too long, and it's time for change. I think it becomes risky when the same person is running a country, no matter how good he is, for this long. So those are my opinions. Yeah.
Okay. Here's another interesting question. What do you think about Pigozzi's collection? John Pigozzi, big collector of African.
John Pigozzi, yeah. Well, I think Pigozzi was a very smart businessman. I think I take my hat off to him for realizing so early that Africa has so much potential. I think he chose to work with Albert Magnan, who's very, very smart and has a good eye and spent a lot of time in Africa and knows the market well. I think it's unfortunate, in my opinion, that Pigozzi himself never traveled down to Africa to actually meet the artists and understand the art he was buying. That I find a bit strange. But he's done amazing things. He's just donated a bunch of work to the MoMA, I believe, if I remember correctly. So that's great to get these artists into and I think he made a great investment. I mean, he's made a great name for himself, and he made great money. I think all of us want to be investors in art, have a lot to learn from John Pigozzi. But I think somebody mentioned earlier on that some of the people who started the African contemporary art market have lost touch with what's really happening right now, and I think this is a good example. I think I don't know what Pigozzi's buying, these days, but I don't think he's as involved in the market as he could be in the younger names, or should be. Yeah.
I was watching, I think he's not updating his website, something like this, so I'm not really sure what he's now currently buying, or if he's still buying. For a startup collector, which is the best purchase, their first art piece, auctions or galleries? From Gloria Worms.
Definitely galleries. Auctions, you should go to auctions when you already know an artist's market, and when you're looking for a specific piece and you can't find it in the gallery, and especially if you're a collector. If you're a dealer, you might look more closely at auctions, because there may be some good bargains to have, even if it's not the piece you would buy for your own collection. Maybe it's a piece you can buy and resell more expensive in the private market. So, but for a private collector, I would say galleries, definitely.
Yes. Did an artist ever ask you not to show their work in some countries? By Sharon.
Well, I've had very interesting, pushbacks, because I'm Israeli in some instances. When I was building up the collection for the fund that I manage, and buying artists from some Muslim countries, in some cases when they find out that I was Israeli, they sort of changed their mind about selling me work. And some of them for legal reasons, because legally they weren't allowed to sell to Israelis, and some of them, for political reasons, whatever. That I think is very unfortunate. I mean, and even in Israel, I started collecting Palestinian artists in Israel several years ago through my Start platform. I didn't want my Start platform to only represent, Israelis. I had Arabs, I had Russians, I had Ethiopian artists. I have artists from all different colors and shades and backgrounds in the Israeli society, and I had, I'd been buying Palestinian art, and I initiated a prize actually for a Palestinian artist. And there was so much pushback from the Palestinian artist community that, they felt I was sort of, patronizing them in a way, because, they didn't want to accept an artist a prize from an Israeli collector. Yeah. So I just said, okay, forget it, whatever. If they don't want it, I'm not going to force them. But that's strange. I mean, sometimes politics do get, involved in collecting, and that's sad in my opinion.
Yeah, but in the end, artists without any borders, it should have access to everyone, and I think there's from my point at least, it's absolutely no limitation. No, that's what art should be about. There's so many. Okay, who's driving contemporary African art market now? Paris, Cape Town, Dakar, London, LA, or NIC? By Alvarandi.
All of the above and more to come. The nice thing is that the market is getting more and more global for African contemporary art. I mean, definitely LA has been a hotspot thanks to Stefan and some friends out there. Yeah. There seems to be a lot of interest for African art growing there, and that's amazing. But traditionally, I think Europe has been, where most of the collectors have come from because of the history of colonization and interest in African and, people have been collecting traditional African art. Mm-hmm. But I think today the African art market is globalized, and, and I'm now collaborating with an auction house in Germany that's going to do their first auction of contemporary African art. So, I think every country in the world will have people interested in collecting African contemporary art, and we just need to find the right channels to get to them to grow the market.
Yeah. Here's another interesting one by Olivier Gringer. Do you think that Chinese modern art is dead?
I don't think art is ever dead. I think tastes change. I think, the Chinese have gone through, for the last few years, have basically shifted their focus from their own art scene to international art scenes, yes. Especially, the new brand of, wealthy global collectors. Yeah. But I think, as the middle class become more wealthy in China, I think a lot of them will want to collect art, both modern, antique, and contemporary. And I think all markets will grow as I think, one of the, things that I was building my strategy on when I set up the fund was, about this growing middle class and how, when you get to a certain status in life, one of the things that will differentiate you is the kind of art you buy. And I think that is something that the Chinese, I always thought that, Chinese, Indian, will always want to, when they get wealthy, to find ways to create a persona for themselves that's a bit distinct and different from others, and art is one of the ways to do that. So I always imagined there would be a lot of new collectors coming out there, and I thought, they would be buying back their own work. At the moment, in the last few years in China particularly, the trend has been to buy international art rather than local, but those things, change. And the short answer is no, the modern Chinese art market is not dead. It's just going through a lapse, and it will come back.
Yeah. I agree. Since I was in Shanghai, most of all the galleries in Shanghai, having as well some international artists in their program, and then a lot of Chinese. So it's kind of shifting. It's not only contemporary Chinese. combined with a mixed international exhibition program.
Yeah.
Are prints a good way to start collecting art? What would you recommend?
I think it's better to buy prints than not to buy art at all. But if you can, instead of buying 10 prints, buy one original piece, I would recommend that.
Mm-hmm.
So
here's Moffat is it's just a quote, but do you also agree the post-independence African artist and art brings a totally different voice and a fresh perspective from born free minds? Do you agree on this?
Certainly. Yes. I mean, I think, if we talk about globalization and what it's doing to African contemporary art, I think that's a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it's great that everybody knows what's happening everywhere. And, the new generation are, free spirits and thinking about global issues and talking about them in their art. But I think there's also something very interesting about maintaining traditions and craftsmanship in Africa. That's something that I'm very interested in. And, the last thing I want to see is, art from Africa looking exactly like the art coming from Europe or Asia and having, everyone follow the same mold. I think what's interesting about Africa at the moment is that it's still, grassroots. I mean, I think there's a lot of, local tradition that's coming out in the work and local and African aesthetics, which make it, the most interesting part of the art world, in my opinion, at the moment.
Yeah.
But I mean, whether I like it or not, things will change, and and there'll be more platforms for education. There'll be more crossover. You'll have more European artists or Western educated artists coming and setting up residencies and programs in Africa and educating the new generation of artists based on the Western model. And with time, I think a lot of this originality, I think, that we have today will be more difficult to find. So I think this is the golden age. What we're collecting now is amazing. What we've been collecting in the last 5 years is amazing, in the long-term perspective.
Okay, great. What do you think about the art scene in Lagos in general?
Well, it's thriving. The art scene in Lagos is thriving. There's so many artists, residencies, auction houses, amazing collectors. Obviously, there's the art fair, Tokini's Artex Lagos, which is doing amazingly well. I mean, it's still a small fair, but it's great. I mean, Tokini is amazing. How well she's connected in Nigeria, and she's got a great eye, great team. She's very ambitious, and I'm sure that fair will continue to grow. So a new museum just opened in Lagos, or is opening very soon. So there's a lot going on there. I think it's a great scene.
Do you think like Lagos or Cape Town, where is like the vibe hype, or the which is like the city of where you need to go when you see art? Is it like more the Cape Town or Lagos? Which would you recommend?
Well, I think if you're starting, definitely Cape Town. I think it's a much bigger scene. There are lots more established galleries that are also exhibiting globally and representing artists from all across Africa, not just South Africa. So, Cape Town is a much more interesting scene. Johannesburg and Cape Town, I would say, South Africa in general. The art fairs there are much bigger. There are a lot more museums. There are a lot more collections to visit. So if you're starting off, I would say, go to South Africa, and then, Nigeria is definitely a good place to go. Ghana, Zimbabwe is a very young and very interesting scene. Simcoe wrote earlier, Zimbabwe Rules. I agree. There are a lot of artists from Zimbabwe that I've been collecting that are amazing. Ivory Coast is interesting. A lot of good places to go. But if you're starting, definitely South Africa.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I agree. What is your favorite work of or artist in your contemporary African art collection, and why? by Sophie Fraser? Is there anyone? Or...
Great question, but that'd be very, very tough to answer. I don't think I can. I mean, there's so many. Every piece I bought there is a piece I love, and they're all great artists. And I don't think there's one favorite. I mean, like I said, it's usually the one I last bought. So that's really the last piece I bought was, I think, by Toli Mekonjo, which was the day before yesterday or something. So but there isn't one that will forever be my favorite piece. No.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Okay. Do we have some more questions? There are so many quotes. Do we have some more questions? We have here some questions. Do you think that digital art will be on the rise after COVID-19?
I think we spoke about that earlier in the call. I think it's a bit of a repeat. The answer is yes, but I don't think we should dwell on that much longer.
What do you mean when you say young artists? Okay.
What do I think about young? What do I mean when I say young artists? Artists that are generally starting their career, that are maybe only represented locally or not represented at all. Maybe artists who don't yet have an auction record. Basically young, emerging, not necessarily young by age, but in terms of their career. There was a question there. What do I think about private museums?
Yes.
To both of us, I think there was a question.
Both.
Private museums, I think, are amazing. I mean, they're a great initiative. I think the risk with private museums is that a lot of them are set up, not a lot of them, but some of them have been set up with some haste. And I'm not sure that sufficiently well planned for the future in terms of the finances to keep the museum running. But I think the more museums there are out there, the better. Obviously, private museums will always come, secondary in terms of their influence on what's happening in the world, because, there's always that underlying concern that, it's not really an independent platform, and, people are showing, what they own, basically, or what they're interested in promoting. And if it's transparent, then there's no reason not to. I mean, it's and some of those museums are showing amazing art, and they can be much more flexible than big museums, and they can do much more interesting projects with artists. And so I think it's a fantastic development, and the more there are, the merrier, as long as they're well managed and well funded.
Yeah. Yes, especially well curated, as we had all the discussion with Salzmöcker.
Well, Salzmöcker is not entirely a private museum. It's kind of
mixed.
Yeah, it's not a private museum. I mean, it has it was founded by Jochen, and he contributed a big chunk of his collection to it on some kind of long-term loan. I'm not sure exactly what the deal is, but he was definitely the instigator of the idea, and he deserves a lot of credit. Yeah. I think the nice thing about the Zeit is that it's run more like true independent institution, despite the fact that it carries his name.
Yeah. Do you think you will travel to fairs in autumn or winter, presuming the run as normal, or would be less likely to travel after all of this?
I'll be, in general, I've really, really, really benefited from this lockdown and being home. I've really enjoyed it. I moved back to, an old house I've had in my family for many years, and it's been great fun, taking care of the house and spending a lot of quality time with the kids, and, and taking things, having more time to think and think about things from a different perspective. And I am in no rush to go back to the craziness of, nonstop traveling like I've had for, the past decade. So will I go to art fairs? Certainly. I mean, I can't stop being interested in new art and networking and getting to know people. And so I think art fairs are a great place. I mean, I think art fairs will continue, but we'll see a massive contraction in that area. I think a lot of fairs, will not make the muster, not in terms of, the quality of the art, will not be able to attract enough people, and will not be able to make ends meet financially. So we'll see a lot less fairs, I think, in the near future than in the past. But the big fairs, will keep on going, and and I'll go to the ones I feel I need to be at. But I'll try to be much more thoughtful about which ones I go to.
Yeah. I agree. Especially like the big fairs, like Art Basel, Hong Kong, whatever it happens now with online things. I think accessibility is now in a different way. You can see it online, although it's not the same experience. But I think there will be kind of a shift, because like for me, it's hard to travel like all the time. So I rather focus on the best things.
Okay, I think we've answered
most
questions. Yeah.
Yes. We were talking for 1.5 hours. It's been very, very great. Thank you so much, Serge. If you would be interested, it would be great maybe in some weeks, to continue this or doing a second talk. Maybe let's see what happens then with this pandemic scene, how we get some new information about art market and so on. If you would be interested, and there is so much response today as well, we can continue. We can do this again.
Always happy to speak and share my thoughts. And if anybody out there isn't following me, my Instagram is just my name, Serge Tiroche in one word. And there's also a website, sergetiroche.com, that sort of is kind of an umbrella website that under which you can see my main activities in the art world.
Yes.
And I'm always open to questions, collaborations, ideas. Feel free to reach out to me.
Yes.
Our emails are on the websites. And Oliver, congratulations for this amazing initiative. I think it's been fantastic. I've been listening into some of them. Keep it up, and I'm sure we'll continue to collaborate in different ways in the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I will keep it up. Next talk will be on Friday, artist talk again, with Gresham Tevia and Nilaude. You have them as well. He
was on residency
on Friday evening, and
that's great.
Of course, everyone can join again. And on Sunday, I have another great collector couple, which I will announce the name in a few days. So I'm very much looking forward. Thank you so much, and
thank you, Oliver.
Keep on. Everyone takes care, stay home, and don't get sick, please.
Ciao, everyone.
Thank you so much. Enjoy your evening. Bye bye.
You too.